Zeena, I loved your profile picture on your Zoom.
Showing up as my true self, always.
Yes, that's what we want to see. Hi, everyone. My name is Zeena Bayasgalan. I'm a board member at Asians in Advertising and a director of marketing at Cordia. I'm a first-generation Mongolian American who grew up in South Korea and moved to the US around 13 years ago. And I'm super, super excited to talk to you all. Amazing leaders in our industry. We have Josh Paialii, Group Creative Director at the Many, Zeena Koda, Senior Director, Global Brand Digital Marketing at North Face, and co-founder of Asian American Collective, and Charles Su, Media and Partnership Lead and co-founder of NT Agency Group. So I'm super excited to talk to y'all. I would love to hear a little bit of your bio. So can you introduce yourself? I will go with Charles first.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. As Senna said, over here in LA, one of the co-founders for a media agency. We've been around for about 4 years now, and was able to really thrive through the pandemic, and just very excited to be here and speaking with everyone, and hoping to help inspire or ideate some things. And yeah, looking forward to the chat.
Zeena, you want to go?
Sure. Sorry, just had to make sure that I wasn't on mute, right? You would think 2 years into this, we'd have a little bit more insight. I'm Zeena Koda. I'm a proud Filipino American. I'm a mestiza, in fact, I'm happy. I oversee brand digital at the North Face, working on the brand marketing team. Have worked in digital for a good lion's share of my career. Actually, prior to this, it's been my entire career in music and media. So I did a bit of a career pivot, but I think that life is, variety is the spice of life. So you have to keep it interesting and busy. And I also, as you mentioned, co-founded Asian American Collective, which is an official nonprofit focused on education and mentorship for young Asian creatives who are interested in meeting each other and elevating their careers.
I love it. Josh?
Hey everyone, Josh Paialii. Really excited to be here. I'm a Group Creative Director at The Many. We're an independent ad agency based here in LA, but we have staff and folks all over the country. So proud to represent them. Also proudly representing Pacific Islanders. I'm half Samoan, half white. I'm really excited about this conversation, and really honored to have been invited by Asians in Advertising to join this panel today. So excited to chat.
Thanks, Josh. And thank you all for joining for this conversation today, because yesterday our theme was working on yourself. And today's theme is working with others. So it's really important, obviously, to be a great colleague, and great employee, as well as just all around good human to, get ahead in your career and getting to that next leadership position. But a great deal of your chance to advance in your career really depends on what kind of, leader you have, right? What kind of leader you have in your organization, what kind of leader you have in your team. And I think the pandemic, a little over 2 years of the pandemic really highlighted this, and the importance of effective leadership and the ability to lead people through these unprecedented times. And this is really why I'm so excited about this talk. I'm so excited to talk to y'all and just learn how to be an effective leader. So let's kick it off the panel by talking about your leadership journey. And I would love to hear how has being Asian, Asian and Pacific Islander in the industry really impacted your leadership journey. And if there is, if what you would love to share about, your experiences in API in the industry. So let's start with you, Charles.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's been very interesting. Been in agency pretty much all my life. Like 50% of Los Angeles I meet, I'm also a transplant. So I've been on the East Coast and the West Coast and really seen the cultural difference. But, there's definitely the bamboo ceiling, right? Everyone's talking about it. We all know that exists. And because of that and the trials and, hardships, if we will, of having to deal with that, I've definitely been able to grow a lot of empathy that I didn't expect to grow. And I think that empathy has really been able to help me understand my peers, my team, direct reports, et cetera, and be able to harness and utilize that. And I really think in this day and age, especially in the past 2 years, over the pandemic, you really need to be able to connect on a personal level, understand where people are coming from, really empathize with them. And in doing so, you will be able to naturally figure out how to trigger and motivate them. And I think that's very important when you're talking about, managing multiple direct reports or, peers. Sometimes you're in a group project, campaign, whatever it is, fill in the blank. And it's especially important as the workforce, and I think we're going to get into this a little later, is also evolving from millennials to Gen Z, right? And those are very, very two different groups of people, and they are going to react to you and to the rest of your company in different ways. So yeah, I think empathy has been one of the big things that I have noticed has been really helpful. And you really have to try and understand in order to be a successful leader.
Amazing. I love that you brought up empathy because especially the pandemic, it really highlighted, who can actually lead better, who can actually connect with you on a personal level. So thank you for sharing that. Zeena?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to have the Gen Z conversation. I think it's something at the tip of a lot of managers' tongues, especially if you are a millennial like myself, or a boomer, or somebody who may be struggling to understand the differences. But that's a really rich conversation I'm excited to have. My leadership journey has been kind of a natural one for me. I spent most of my life in bands, working with others, which, like, honestly, just makes you extremely emotionally intelligent and understand how to deal with people, right? Whether it's on a peer-to-peer level or as a leader, because I do believe that, you can lead amongst your peers as well, right? And that's actually a big part of leadership. And I think being a really effective leader, because people need to have trust in you that you can get things done with your peers. Working in the music industry, we were both peers and leaders, right? Because we're working in a lot of different areas that pretty much like cross-section each other, right? So that was a really weird place to cut my teeth as a leader, because I both had to be in the trenches with the kids on my team, but also like lead from above and manage up, right? And I've always tried to lead as a coach, right? And give as much empathy, but also tools to my staff as I can, to allow them to make the right decisions, but be there when they need a little bit of extra oomph and a little extra coaching. I would say being an Asian hasn't necessarily affected my leadership style as much. Being a BIPOC woman has definitely changed the lens by which I look at, I look at my leadership commitments, especially in a sea of, white cis males that are making these really key decisions in huge companies across the board, whether you're at agencies, whether you're at music companies, media companies, brands. That's the one parallel that keeps on coming back. So having that perspective and that responsibility and looking at things through that lens as both a woman and a woman of color has been a really strong driver to keep my purpose very focused as a leader, and support as much change as possible, and support the staff that I hire through that lens as well.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks, Zeena, and thanks for bringing up like being an Asian, being mixed person, also being a woman, like all that intersectionality and being a leader, right? I think that makes it so much more richer when you talk about your experience. So I'm really excited to dig in there more. Josh?
Yeah, and I mean, Zeena, I really, resonate with that as mixed myself, coming up through my journey of leadership. I would say, coming up, so many aspects that I pull from in how I lead and, how I look at my teams and manage, came about at different stages of my career. Even as a young creative coming up, learning how to manage up and be resonant, be personable, be able to showcase and share my work with those leaders above me was a skill that, with every different leader, you have to retool, you have to recraft in a particular way. Then as you become more of a senior and an associate creative director, as you're starting to work more with teams, you're starting to become more of a mentor for them, understanding how to start managing down and imparting what you know on them to try and guide the work. But I think really as I've grown into becoming more of a creative director, now as a group creative director, as a department lead, as I reflect back on my journey getting here, I now am able to reflect and look back and really realize that so many of my direct reports, so many of my leaders throughout that journey have been white men. And at the time, that's not a knock on them. That's just the industry that we are in. So now as we are in a time where representation matters more than ever. And, it matters not only in the work that we're putting out into culture, but how we are actually a reflection of that culture within our own agencies and in our own companies. It's made me really realize, like, I need to be asking some of the tough questions that maybe some of my previous leaders weren't able to ask, be it around casting decisions with our clients, be it around conversations around diversity and the casting that we do within our own agencies. And now I feel like that's such a responsibility and an honor that I have to take on myself as a leader, and has really kind of shaped the way that I look at the way I go about my everyday.
That's amazing, Josh. Yeah, and I love that you said, responsibility as a representative of our community, because there are so few of us making to the top, and it's so important for the people who are there to use their voices to make it open and make it more easier for the next generation to come up and access to that leadership positions. So I know we're going to talk about amazing things about the multi-generation managing, upwards, sideways. But before we go there, from your experience as a leader, what has been the most important characteristic or skill of being an effective boss? Charles, you want to go?
Yeah, definitely. I've had the privilege and the frustrations, if you will, of scaling, many big teams up to 60 plus. And I think although those were very trying times, those were the times where I learned the most about management, right? Uh, I think a top characteristic that I would say is being proactive. And of course, that can apply to many different realms of your business and your day-to-day operations. But being proactive for your team as you are the conduit of communication is extremely important. When you're a leader and you have direct reports, you are pretty much a 24/7 PR crisis management shop, right? There are going to be things that are coming from above, things coming from clients that you have to decipher, interpret, and make sure that the communication lines to your direct reports are done in such a way that it won't cause chaos and be toxic, in other words, right? And being proactive is very important, and in that you have to learn how to be, yes, all the things, a motivator. You have to learn how to deflect and buy time and things like that in your communication. But I really think understanding how you're going to deliver messages, things that are going to be happening, big changes in the organization, perhaps 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months out. Your team, how certain people, they're going to ask questions, they're going to react, they're going to talk to their friends. These are things that you have to really get a hold of, because it's your job to make sure that the engine runs smoothly, right, as a leader. So yeah, I think being proactive is definitely something I found to be very helpful.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree, because in times like this, when your executives communicated transparently and efficiently and ahead of panic, was so helpful. So I love that, being proactive and being ahead of the game. Zeena?
I would say all of that. That was great. Being a bit of a politician internally, for sure. I would say patience is an obvious one, but it's one that's really hard to practice. frankly. Like everybody gets annoyed as hell. They're in their own personal life, right? And some days you have it and some days you don't, right? And I think that that's just a true reality, because managers are also human, right? But really practicing patience and consciousness of the effect of your patients is extremely important. And I would say one of the biggest things is being invested in your employees and also being a person of your word. When you say you're going to get something done, you following through with that with your employees is extremely important. Even if the answer is, hey, I don't have the answer right now, but in 2 months, let's circle back and I'll get you the answer that you're looking for. Well, you better have an answer in those 2 months, right? And I think that employees note that and they see it, because we know at all different levels of management, hey, we're managed by people too, right? Like, and we respect that in managers that we may have as well. So being a person of your word really goes a long way, and it also says a lot about who you are as a leader without saying anything. Yeah, somebody says accountability. Yeah, exactly. Like having that accountability and that honest connection through following through is extremely important to get buy-in from your staff.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just following, like building that trust and actually, walking the talk is really just good thing, good thing to follow as a good human being, right? Like good leader, good human being. Josh?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, being accountable and knowing that your word is your bond when it comes to your team is so important. I think, just to build on that, being a protector for them. And this comes from a place, Charles, you hit on around empathy. And I think, especially over the last couple of years, we've realized that everyone's going through different things. Like some people are at home dealing with sick family members. Some parents at home are trying to balance working while also navigating their kids learning right alongside of them. I think as I think about my teams, that I'm helping to protect and get the best work out of, we all respond differently, and are inspired by different ways of working. Some writers love to work in the morning and really love their best writing is going to come in the morning. Some teams actually are working across time zones. And so the best way for them to actually work together is going to be in the middle of the day when typically we have meetings. I think my job as a creative leader, when I think about my teams, what's going to get the best out of them is protecting the times and the moments where they're going to actually thrive the most. If that means making sure and protecting those moments where you're not going to be in meetings here, because this is when you're going to get the best product and the best output and creativity out of you, that's my job to be on the lookout for. And I think also, part of that conversation is also just honesty. I think we also mentioned like meeting them where they are at, I think is such an important component of leading teams right now, because everyone is motivated differently. Some folks, are coming in and like, they just really want to get more experience working in film and TV. Some are coming in and say, listen, like, I really want to work on my presentation skills. Everyone's coming in with something that they need to work on. And I think there's a great opportunity to build a bit more of those honest conversations to say, if that's what you want to work on, how can I find those opportunities for you? The last thing that I would say to that is, we're an industry that rewards movement. And we love, especially as a hiring manager, I love creatives and looking at candidates that have a diverse range of experiences, big agencies, small agencies, in-house and whatnot. And I think it's really important that when they come in, we don't lie to them and say, we want you to stay here forever. The point of you being here is for you to be a part of our agency for the next 10 years. I want people that are working alongside my teams to know, I know you might leave in a year or in 2 years. How can I help make you the best version of what you want to be and the best version of who you can be in that next position that you're going to take somewhere? I think if they understand that, they're going to pour everything into every brief, into every meeting that they have, because they know we're invested in them as people too.
Wow. Yeah, Josh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And if you feel that valued, if you feel that invested, I don't think those people will leave you that soon, right? Because like it's people don't leave because of hard work. I think a lot of times people leave because bad management. But thank you for sharing this. If I hear like what I heard was Charles, being proactive, communicating transparently. Zeena, you said um, being honest, building trust, following up on your words. And Josh, you said amazingly, like protector, being a protector. And honesty is so important, so you're not trying to keep them there, you're actually trying to help them get to their goal, get to where they want to go, and actually building amazing next generation of leader. So I love that. Thank you so much. That's so incredible. And I think whoever wants to be, whoever's trying to be the next leader, up and coming leaders can really take that and take a note of that, right? Like, because those are really important qualities. So we've been talking about, the managing different generations. I'm really excited to hear your opinions on this, because now the old school management style that focused on control or, one size fits all approach is really no longer effective. For today's purpose-driven communities, a lot of our, newer, younger generations are very purpose-driven. They're keeping companies accountable. So I really want to hear how you're leading the multi-generational workforce. Charles?
Yeah, no, this is such a great and I feel like important topic. It weighs so much significance. And I truly believe that the group of people here and that Asians everywhere are best fit to navigate through this. Because when it really comes down to it, and there are obviously stereotypes between millennials and Gen Z and boomers and whatever, we can go on and on, right? But what does that mean? It means that there are cultural differences. And that's not something that we are strangers of, right? There's a culture and stereotypes to millennials. There's a culture and stereotypes to Gen Z. They're just different types of people. It's different people from different walks of life with different triggers, with different things that they feel are important to them, that they can be proud of and whatnot. And it's our job to just navigate them, right? Generally speaking, millennials, they get a bad rep. They're entitled. Uh, they want shortcuts. They weigh too much on their on their career. And Gen Z is maybe a little less career focused, but they're very much aware of social norms. They will absolutely speak up, right? They aren't afraid of anything. But in either light, if there are negative tangents to those and it's not addressed quickly and you don't have a plan, it could become toxic, right? And let me go on and say, some of the brightest people that I've met in the recent years have been Gen Z. It is an absolutely great generation. We are well in hand. There's a bunch of bright new faces in the workforce. But as much of a blanket statement it is, how do we make sure that we get rid of these cultural differences, if you will, right? I found it very helpful, and it ties back to something just very generic, is how are you working on your own culture for your team? And how is the company's culture, right? I've always found that the best places to work at, I've always seen the highest amount of employee retention is when there are large group of friends, right? People tend to stay at a company because they have friends. That's the truth, right? If they're happy and they go to work and they know that they can, talk with their peers and their friends and have these events or whatever, it's a good working environment, and they won't look elsewhere. Typically, they'll deal with some of the hardship, right? So knowing that, I've always tried to make sure that if there's new people coming in, we make sure they feel welcome, they fit in somewhere very quickly. And whether that's a social aspect that they fit in, or mentor, mentee, like-minded group they fit in, I feel that it really helps them feel at home. And then what happens is everything is generally very positive. The types of you know, I guess, you know, frustrations or the types of differences that you see between the two generations or whatnot really don't clash as long as everybody is kumbaya, if you will, right? So I think, you know, really making sure that the culture you have in place uh, eliminates the barriers, if you will, right? Breaking down barriers of the different types of people that you're managing on your team, and that goes beyond just Gen Z millennials. I mean, it's really any walk of life.
No, Charles, that makes sense. Like, we having all these diverse people, we're trying to build a diverse workforce. And when we actually have these people, like, how do we work with them? How do we make them work together, right? I think that's a leader's job to figure it out, how to manage these people. And I love that you said, you know, figuring out what's important to each of them, and how, you know, finding out how to bridge that differences if they have any, and building more deeper connections at work, like, so they can feel like they belong somewhere. So thank you so much. Zeena?
I like what Charles said a lot about really taking time to invest and making sure that there's a friendliness aspect within those different intergenerational people who are working on staff. I think, you know, I work in an area that's very digital and generally younger, right? So I deal with a lot of Gen Zers and always kind of have in different capacities that I've been in, or like other younger millennials. But it's always been a bit of a challenge, as he mentioned, to kind of like bring all of these people together to sit in one space and find commonality. And I think the thing you have to look at is like we're all here to do a good job and or want to be inspired by our job. Now, the mechanism to get there can be completely different, but I think as a manager too, when you're getting a little bit more personal and you're a bit one-on-one with your staff, I think it's really taking a step back and putting yourself aside from your preconceived notions, which you do as a manager all the time, right? But when you're looking generationally, especially I think with like younger generations, because I feel like we're learning with them what this younger generation is becoming, right? Like, think about the fact that there is an entire generation of people who have information at their hands, as like access to information at their hands at all times. You know, they didn't have to like go to the library to access the internet a few hours a day, right? Like, they didn't have to have that hardship because information has always been readily available. And I think there's actually a wrong notion that makes them lazier, or they're, you know, they're not that everything is just there for them. I think in fact it makes them more curious, and it makes them have at least like this curiosity to find out more about the world, which we're seeing in them becoming, you know, a really like values driven group that is putting basically everybody else on their ass and calling things out, right? So I think there's a lot of just understanding that you as a manager need to existentially have. And sorry, I'm still like getting over being sick. Doing that comes through conversation and also taking it out of just work, right? So that's why I circle back to what Charles said about being friends, or just really understanding people on a personal level, to get the greatest buy-in from your staff and from the people around you. You have to know each other as people. So taking some time out to really ensure that you're kind of, you know, taking those opportunities to either be in real life or even do like a coffee over Zoom or a wine night over Zoom. Like, you have to find these ways to personally connect with people, and not just listen to what they're saying, but really hear them and dissect that and how you manage yourself and how you manage others around you.
Amazing. I love that. Zeena, I love that you said, you know, the younger generations now, they're actually really values driven instead of lazy, you know, compared to a lot of people think, older generations think. I totally agree with you. I think the younger generation is so value driven. They're very, you know, purpose driven. They want to belong in a community. They want to build communities. They want to keep organizations, keep companies, keep communities, and keep people accountable. They're not being quiet. They're actually loud. They say what they want to say, and I love that. I'm so excited what kind of leaders they will become, and I'm a very big fan of them, obviously. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, just to build on what Zeena was saying, because we all, especially as we are talking to new clients, as we are recruiting new talent, talking about how we are values-driven organizations is, one of the top things that we want to communicate with everyone that we're engaging with. And I think, we have to put action behind those words. And so when I think about, the way that, a lot of us came up in our previous organizations with previous leaders, where the commonplace was, hey, we're going to reward people that are working, going above and beyond by working late into the night, or celebrating that team that worked through the weekend so that they could deliver this campaign. That in itself is such an antiquated way of thinking about how we are rewarding and celebrating our people. Now we have, so much of this new generation too is inspiring us to actually take stock in the value of personal time and balance. And personal time and balance, especially over the last couple of years, being that thing that not only gives us balance in life, but is going to make the work itself better. And so I think with some of those conversations that might be, hey, can we not hit this deadline, coming up? Can we just work the weekend? It's like, no, we need to give teams this weekend off, because that's what's actually going to showcase our values as an agency, that we are people first, that we are putting them first. Actually changing fundamentally the way we've been thinking about things isn't saying what we were doing was wrong. It's actually a reflection of our values. And that's more important than the way we had been doing things. So I think a lot of those conversations, especially as we sit in between big generational divides, is part of bringing some of those processes and systems together and saying, hey, we can change this without giving up who we are.
I love that. I think you're right. I remember working weekends and, thinking I did a really amazing job. And now in the past, 2-3 years, this completely changed, right? Now we have to actually think about, how do we not burn out? How do we, lead our team so they don't burn out, they don't just actually perform highest of their abilities and be creative, and they take rest. And that's so important. And I love that all of you are touched on that importance of understanding everybody's different, what's important to them, and and just understanding them as in a human level. I think that's so important. And the changing the leadership style and having processes in place. So thank you so much for sharing that insights. And Zeena, you mentioned this earlier about managing, up. Because strong teams leadership isn't enough to be an effective boss anymore. So, and some research showing that the importance of also mobilizing your boss and peers, right? So what is your top tip on managing upwards and sideways?
Go king to king and don't give any bullshit. I think too often people fuck around and want to just basically BS with each other or talk shit, right? I think the biggest thing about it is that you need to have a strategy in place and you need to go to the king, right? And when you get to the king, you need to have your argument completely ready to go so that you're ready to come in with what you need. Often I think people are too afraid. And maybe I'm the complete antithesis of the Asian stereotype, because I am not timid. I am aggressive. In fact, I'm from New Jersey, maybe too aggressive at times, but I've found it to be very effective when I am both succinctly aware of what my argument is and how it's going to come in, and when I go to the right person immediately and don't waste my time with the middle management here. Like if you need to get something done, and I feel like Charles definitely will know this as somebody who's managed so many people, it's a waste of time to go to those in-between parties. So managing up is hard, right? And getting in front of people is hard, but I expect my direct reports to manage up to me as well. And I ask the same of them to be very succinct, very straightforward with what they're looking for, but also have an outcome in mind. of what you want to happen. And I think that often people want to complain, right? And say, oh, you know, you didn't do this or this didn't happen and X, Y, and Z. But the bottom line is you have to be solutions oriented to solve problems in business, right? And whatever problems come your way, because we all know there's about 900 problems that come at any given time, it's fine. Like, you can't let the problem affect you. You need to think solutions first in order to get that done. And in managing up and also encouraging my staff to manage up to me, let's talk their solutions first and not think, like, not use our time to hash out things that have already happened.
Okay. Yeah. So I love that you're showing your staff how to manage up, and you're like creating that expectation, like you want them to manage up to you. I really like that. Josh, you want to go?
Yeah, no, I'd love to build on that, because 100%. I think more and more we are asking, you know, our teams to be solutions oriented. We're asking all of our people to come to the table with solutions. And it's funny, I have a lot of conversations with, you know, teams and former colleagues and whatnot around, you know, imposter syndrome. And they'll come and say, hey, like, I really feel like I'm suffering from imposter syndrome right now. It's like, the reality is so many leaders are suffering from imposter syndrome too. And like, the sooner we realize that and realize that might be driving some of the decisions that they're particularly making, coming to the table with solutions is that much more important, coming with a different perspective. And I think some of how we come to the table, you know, I like to think that it's much easier for a leader to dismiss a solution that isn't theirs than it is to dismiss a good question. And sometimes a good question that's going to ultimately lead to where you're coming from with a solution can be the thing that opens the door with a lot of those leaders too. Asking, hey, I'd love to learn more of your thought process, why you decided to go in this direction, or why this particular decision was made. Can I offer a different perspective? I think opening the door with wanting to learn what's in their head first might be also that way of being able to service up your solution without them also feeling defensive that you're coming with a solution that wasn't theirs to begin with.
Love that. Yeah, Josh. Earlier, Eric was talking about, Eric and Ariba talked about networking and just, how people can reach out to C-level executives to network with them. And this, I think, kind of ties with it because they're people too, right? Like, connect with them in a human level and be genuine with your curiosity. And that's how you build the relationship, and that's how you can kind of, get to them and ask them a good question, kind of give them different perspectives and offer something instead of trying to get something from them. I think that's really, really good. Charles?
Yeah, I mean, wow, this is such a important topic. And the unfortunate fact is that this is one case where you're not always going to win, right? And that's just how it is. It's very sad, but when something comes down from high up or from even outside of your company or whatever, sometimes you just have to deal with it. I think the important thing is, and I apply this to client services as well. There's never a no, there's always a compromise, right? Sure, okay, we have to do, there are no promotions, there's no bonuses, there's no whatever it is. Going back to being proactive, communicating. Okay, well, you have to then demand with your upper management or whatever. Okay, you got to give me something. Negotiate with them, understand, or like Zeena said, go to the king, right? Like this, this is going to cause massive turmoil. We have to find a better way. So there are always compromises that you can do, whether it's for your team or whether it's for yourself. Maybe it's a promotion for yourself or things like that. And hey, I get it, right? We have headcount, we have, there's P&L and blah, blah, blah. We've already, whatever. What else can you give me? Can I get some days off? Can I bust my ass? There's always something that you can look to try and negotiate and compromise. Josh is going to say it too. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to speak up. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. Be confident. Know your worth. Speak up. Leaders like that. Look, you might feel like, oh, I'm going to ask him again. I'm going to, bug her again. No, you deserve to be heard. Make sure you're top of mind. Really do that, and eventually, it'll get through. It'll get through in some way, shape, or form, and it only gives you more leverage. And I would say the last thing is, we kind of it's funny because I do feel like being a leader, you do have to be a politician sometimes, right? If it's something that's very important and you need to get it done, because managing up, this term doesn't come to light unless there's an issue or a business decision that needs to be overturned or changed, right? Let's be honest. That's what we talk about when we say managing up. Garner support. So if it's something that is for you or for your group or for your peers, get some people to go with you. Garner support, have more voices, make that change. Hey, we deserve this. Hey, we deserve another break. Hey, we deserve, some time, whatever it is, get some people to fight for that proper cause. And if the cause is justifiable, more often than not, they'll at least listen, and hopefully that works into a compromise. And that's probably one of the best ways you can try to manage up and get a win.
I love it. Yeah. I love it, Charles. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that is, you said something that was so amazing. Know your worth, right? Like, and go to them and ask and speak up and have that support. I think that's also like managing sideways, like having your peers and they having your back. I think that's so important. We got a lot of questions, so we'll dive into the Q&A. I hope you're all ready. So first question, how did you prove to your company that you were worthy to be a manager? Who want to take it?
I mean, you come in as a manager. I can't remember a time where I wasn't a manager at this point. So, I mean, I think in general, if you're looking to elevate to that point, right, it's a matter of positioning yourself. And it's a matter of understanding what the company looks for in a manager, finding mentorship opportunities if you aren't already if you're not working with direct reports, or, maybe there are some people who might be of a junior level that you can help at least mentor. I think it's small steps like that when that pipeline isn't immediately available for you that just help to put you put you under a different lens to leadership.
Yeah, I would say, no, that's great. I would say, to your point, you have to find the opportunities that don't exist, right? It's kind of the chicken or egg thing where it's like if you're entry level and you're applying for a job and they're looking for work experience. Well, I don't have any. I just came out of college. Same thing with a manager, how are you effective at managing people? I've never gotten the shot. How can I? So, if you're breaking into that, you have to find the opportunities to show that you have leadership capabilities, right? Leading on projects, maybe doing mentor-mentee programs outside of your company or work, and letting your higher ups know about it, showcasing that you have leadership skills, and really showcasing that you have communication skills. And if they see those things, and they know that also you're very good and well in tune with the culture, they can trust you to have direct reports, and that you can manage things, whether it's human resources or different campaigns and projects.
Okay, next question. Do you find that being a friend boss is hard when needing to come down on someone who's not cutting it? Friend boss. Oof.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
And I think we've touched on, creating those personal relationships is so integral to like creating just like great chemistry and cohesion in your team. So I don't think there's ever an instance where I'm not some aspect of a friend with that person that I'm talking with. But I also think that's a great opportunity to actually level set and say, hey, I hear you. I understand. What I'm hearing from you is you're upset about this, or you really wanted to push on this, even though the agency was saying this wasn't the right direction, or the client said that wasn't the right direction. I hear you on that and understand as a friend why you would want to go there. Here's why we actually need to pivot here. And I think starting from that place of understanding, but always coming down to, but this is the direction that we're going in right now. I hear you, and you're always welcome to complain to me about that. That's what I'm here for as your direct report. But this is the direction that we're going in right now. And being confident in that assertion, I think, is really important.
Love that. Yeah, thank you. Okay, as a manager, if you aren't able to get the answers from those above you, how do you still hold yourself accountable and ensure you can address your report's concerns?
That's a great question. That happens too often, to be honest.
Very
right?
often.
I think that goes back to something we were saying earlier. Is you have to be a master of buying time, because sometimes if there's a decision that comes down, more often than not, decisions will come down with very little context, because you have to understand that sometimes these decisions comes down are even above your boss's 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 boss. There's a merger, there's an acquisition, there's billions of dollars happening, there's a transactional thing upon a business thing. It's just coming down from somewhere, from the ether that nobody knows, but they know that they have to get it done. The best thing you can do is maintain the peace, try to keep people calm. Easier said than done, I know, but let them know. And this kind of goes back to Josh was saying, right, friend, but have them trust you. You have to earn the trust of your team. You have to earn the trust where it's like, look, I know this is shitty. Look, I know that we don't have all the answers. I don't know what's going to happen, but I promise you, I'm going to find out as soon as possible, right? And it's going to be okay. And as soon as I hear, I'm going to let you know, and we'll get through it, right? Your team has to trust you in order for you to play that card. So that's going to be very important.
I love it. I love it. There's another question, and I want to ask this question too, because this happens to me a lot. Oftentimes you can look younger than they actually are. I think that means like Asians and Pacific Islanders. And that goes hand in hand with judgments about experience and respect. How do we address that type of ageism as managers?
That's an assumption, right? There's a lot of assumptions there. You're assuming that they have a notion of how old you are and that they're treating you a certain way because of that. And also within that, there's a subcontext of bias, right? Like against you for whatever that may be, right? If there's one thing I've learned as you get higher up the ranks, you'd be surprised at the age variety of people who have gotten where they've gotten and how they've gotten there. I've met CMOs that are younger than me, right? I've met like plenty of people older than me who are at a level below me, right? And I think that is, if we go back to the variety of ages and kind of the diversity of employees, right? It's kind of looking at it at that level too. And it's always like approaching how you're interacting with your peers in a way of like garnering respect, right? So like, whether or not they may think you're younger, I think you need to look at yourself if you have that notion too, and think like, is that the truth? Like, is that the truth, right? Like, and it's worth having a conversation with that person if you think that there's a direct, kind of like a direct person who has that notion of you, but also like standing by the quality of your work and standing by what you know and the depth and field and of your knowledge. And I think that those things help people to respect you no matter how old you are. And remembering the presentation is everything, right? Like it's how you present it, it's how you present yourself. It's an unfortunate reality of business that as much as, you were laughing at my photo, like I always want to show up as my true self. I'm kind of goofy, kind of fun, lighthearted, but when I got to get serious, I'm pretty serious, right? And I think that's something that we all kind of battle with, but it's really important to remember that every move that you make as a leader is a perception of who you are. And that's really critical in sculpting your political moves that you make as a leader, because you need to understand that will either help you or harm you, depending on, how it frames up.
Retweet to all of that. I mean, I would also say, one thing that it makes me think about, and to an earlier conversation that we were having about that, intergenerational gap sometimes. And so whether we're talking about, internally, work that, a mid-level team is sharing up with the CCO, or if it is in a room and it's a presentation that, a team is presenting to the client. So many times in those particular moments, I think us as leaders, as that in-between, need to be there to actually double down and say, this work is fire. and like this work is fired for X, Y, and Z reasons. It's not just that they love it. I love this idea because of X, Y, and Z reasons. They've convinced me that this idea is the way that we need to go. And whether or not there's an aspect of, they look young, I don't know if that's trustworthy or they're too junior or whatever it might be, my trust in my team there is what's actually giving that next generation trust. And it's so important for our level to be able to put ourselves on the line for that if we really believe it.
I love that. I'll take one more question. I think we're really close to the time. How do you manage a team of white people and impart a diverse POV without creating conflict and actually having it connect?
Great question.
Senna, can you read that one more time?
Yeah. How do you manage a team of white people and impart a diverse POV without creating conflict and having it connect and actually having it connect?
I think this is an important topic that everyone should go. I haven't had too many issues when if we're talking about just a Caucasian, or it doesn't just have to be Caucasian. Again, you're going back to cultural differences, right? So whether it's a group of African Americans, whether it's Hispanics, whether it's Caucasian, I mean, we're all marking, right? So we've had multicultural campaigns, I'm sure, right? Or you've been exposed to those. As long as you're confident in what it is that your POV is, and you can back it up, it more often than not shouldn't matter. But again, it's hard to see, maybe there's more to it in this question. I think as long as you exuberate confidence and you're able to back up your POV with facts, usually most times people are very reasonable, and there aren't a lot of issues with that.
This is a tricky one, and I think it's really, really important to also be respectful of cultural norms at current, right? And understand that everybody's at a different part of their journey. And also understand that there's a lot of education and checkpoints in this work, right? In learning this work. I feel for a lot of people who might run those teams and come from a different background. And I have many people who are white on my team, right? But they're always very willing to learn and open, but I'm also very respectful of maybe things that they don't know as well. And I think there's a tendency to isolate, especially right now where we are doing a lot of work to educate on, the different nuances of marginalized communities, which are vast, right? I think it's really important to also be considerate of the different levels of knowledge within the white community. And it could be completely different across the board. Not all white people are created equal either. So it's looking at that, cross bias too, and making sure that you're doing this work together and taking small opportunities to actually talk through things when they do get uncomfortable or awkward, and respectfully hear maybe things that they didn't know, provide reading or different materials that could help to educate on both sides, right? Talk about personal experiences that help to find common ground. It's really hard work. And it's hard work that I feel a lot of people who are maybe white and may not have had to confront some of those things may not have had to even openly talk about a lot of these things in the past. So there needs to be a bit of sympathy, especially if you're leading those teams, to understand that it is a journey for everybody. And taking that journey together will help you ultimately do the best that you can as marketers, advertisers, to make content that's actually relevant to a wide swath of audiences, or a granular audience that you have all kind of come together, to target in that way.
Yeah, it's yes to all of that. I mean, I think so much of it is how we as leaders of that team, as be it a creative director or managing director or whatnot, how you react in that moment, like the actual words that are coming out of your mouth at that point. If you respond in a way that feels like, no, you're wrong for X, Y, and Z reason, that immediately puts them on the defensive. Yep. But if there's a consideration that's not being had from that particular team, meeting that with, hey, is this an opportunity to actually consider looking at it from this perspective? And I think opening that door where it's like, oh, I don't have all of the answers, and that's okay. My job as a leader is to open up another window for you to think about this problem through. Be it, I'm just going to use casting in a spot as an example, rather than saying, hey, you're not being representative in this storyboard that you're giving me, in these casting specs that you're giving me. Is this an opportunity to actually consider a more representative cast here? Can we actually be telling a more authentic story by doing that? Maybe that inevitably becomes a question that they start asking themselves in the future, as opposed to just thinking in that moment they were wrong.
Yeah, I love that. And I think as a leader, it's your job to, lead diverse, background of people. And I think that's how you become a better leader, how you become an effective leader, right? If you just manage people who look like you, think like you, talk like you, what's the point? I think that's kind of like one size fits all. But instead of having, white people, people of color, women, men, people with disability, people from all kinds of background, being able to manage those people and being able to learn how to manage each of them differently, not just one way, that's so important for being an effective leader. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your time, and your resources. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope you stay tuned for our next panel, Successful ERG. I'm excited for that. And thank you, Charles. Thank you, Zeena. Thank you, Josh. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senna. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.